3, 2, 1, and we are live on Counterbalance with Mike Doran and Gadi Taub. Hello, Gadi.
Hi from Tel Aviv.
Great to see you. You know, Gadi, today we have a fantastic guest. That Ambassador Ron Prosor is the head of the Abba Eban Institute of International Diplomacy at the Interdisciplinary Center in Herzliya. Before that, he served between 2011 and 2015 as the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations. And before that, he was the ambassador to the United Kingdom and also the Director General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Jerusalem. In his 3 decades as a diplomat, Mr. Prosor carved out an international reputation as one of Israel's most distinguished representatives. Mr. Ambassador, welcome.
Hello from Jerusalem.
Great
the
to have you.
Capital of the Jewish people.
Well, so Gadi and I have a number of things we want to talk to you about. But the one that's foremost on my mind right now is the designation of Hezbollah as a terrorist organization in Germany. That's a major achievement for Israeli and I would say also American diplomacy. And it's my understanding that you played a major role behind the scenes in making that happen. And I wonder if you could share some of that with us.
Absolutely. So my team at the Abba Eban Institute, by the way, you know, everyone knows Abba Eban, our foreign minister. He didn't have a problem articulating himself in the English language. But there's a wonderful story of him. He was a double first from Cambridge. And when he came over to receive his honorary doctorate at Cambridge, in his acceptance speech, he stood up and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm both honored and privileged to be back in this esteemed institution where I learned the virtues of honesty, decency, and integrity, all of which was such a great disadvantage in all my political career." But when we started this thing at the Abba Eban Institute, and that was 2.5 years ago, the premise was the following. We don't really want to tell the Europeans, although it's very nice, it gives us a good feel factor, why Hezbollah is bad for Israel or bad for the region. Yes, they shed some crocodile tears, but they don't really care. We have to be able to show the Europeans that Hezbollah is operating in their own backyard. And the idea in the past was Hezbollah is a designated terrorist organization because they have proved that they're doing terror all over the world. But there was this differentiation, a completely artificial differentiation between the political arm and the military arm in order to allow countries to engage and work with Hezbollah as if they're not a terrorist organization. Why? Because
so the armed wing is considered a terrorist organization and the political arm is considered legitimate
and free. And
it's the same people. These are the same exact people.
Yeah.
Same
and
hierarchy.
By the way, Gadi, Hassan Nasrallah laughs at this artificial differentiation publicly. It's not the one Prosor, it's Hassan Nasrallah who says, this is absolutely absurd. But the idea of this differentiation, artificial differentiation, is of course a British idea where the background of saying, let's find ways to work with Hezbollah, which is legit. The ones that designated the political arm first in Europe were the Netherlands, and because of a series of things that Hezbollah did in Holland, but all the others completely free. So we started with the premise of looking on how do we create change in a country. So you need, first of all, to really work on your facts and do research to show that what they're doing in Germany and connecting the direct dots directly to the military arm of Hezbollah. So you had, research showing pictures of people who are on the political arm and connecting them directly with photographs, with meetings, with the military heads of Hezbollah. In a way, it's like you catch them with a hand in the cookie jar. You're stuck. There's a connection here. So you can't really run away or around this. And then we decided to work on two different dimensions. First of all, do a documentary in German to show Hezbollah, what Hezbollah is doing on German soil, and then to also work on the media and the public domain with politicians, with professionals in Germany, where in Germany they have those firewalls because of the past between different agencies. So the Bundeskriminalamt, which is called the BKA, which is the police, doesn't pass information to the Verfassungsschutz, which is the equivalent of the FBI. And also the equivalent of the CIA, they don't pass information because of
These
the
are
protection.
these firewalls, my understanding is that they were all established after World War II to make sure that you couldn't have a recurrence of the Nazi phenomenon. And
Absolutely.
so it was the solution to one problem, which has now created other problems.
Absolutely. And from a German perspective, you have to give it to them. They're absolutely right. So those firewalls are ingrained in the way they were brought up, their education system, and also on fears, on really stepping too much into privacy, into the issue of personal. So the idea was to be able to show them this information through research, connect it and show criminal families, both in Berlin and in other places, and to show the connection of those criminal families in drug trafficking, in money laundering, and in charities. So like I said, you have a German woman who's really, she's nice, she's willing, she really wants to donate to a charity that supposedly is dealing with orphans. She doesn't have a clue that the money that she gives is a face, or that for someone to buy weapons from Lebanon.
It's a charity for making orphans. They make new orphans all around the world.
But you're right.
Widows and orphans. They make widows and orphans.
Orphans, exactly. But
the widows is a separate charity, Mike.
Yeah.
But I saw the film. I saw a short version with English subtitles of the film, and what was amazing about it, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, what's so persuasive, I think, to Germans is that that you show there is a whole, it's like a huge organized crime network that brings, it's a drug cartel.
It's a drug cartel, and an effective drug cartel with, the elements of choppy. Hence, you do something or you try and move out of this cartel, and choppy, the head flies. So it's not a Mama Teresa organization in a sense. So
and they bring drugs from South America? Mostly?
South America, there's also the connection, by the way, South America, Africa, and it's really interesting because they also use the used car business. They take cars, they sell them. It's amazing what they do. It's like it's a drug cartel and a money laundering cartel at the most sophisticated levels. And like I said, they were completely free. And the reason is that the authorities don't have anything in their toolbox to go after them. The minute you designate them, you're able to go into their emails, you're able to do arrests, you're able to do stuff that you were not able to do before that. And when we managed to get Germany on board, and by the way, the United Kingdom too, and that was also, it's two different things, two different systems. But the minute you had those two countries, now we are moving to the next step, which is step 2, in trying to go into Austria, France, which is going to be a huge challenge because France and Lebanon is, they feel, this is little, they feel, that they have some responsibility on Lebanon, and they always, France is going to be a tough nut to crack.
Can I go back to the German case? It's very interesting. I want to understand better what what it is that you guys brought to the mix. Did the German police know that Hezbollah was doing this? And what you did is by airing this film in German on German television, you helped to create some political momentum that gave them a space to act? Or did you actually give them information that they didn't have?
Okay, so we did two things. First of all, the Germans and the German authorities knew, but I think they have a yearly report of the Verfassungsschutz, which is the FBI, that branded 900 Hezbollah connected individuals in Germany as a whole. There are more than that, but they knew. They also knew that in the ports of Hamburg and Bremen, drug trafficking and drug dealing came into Germany. Okay, they knew that too, but they can't open every container, and they had restrictions on what they can do. So in the sense, we brought in information, but that wasn't enough. We had to bring information to certain federal states, because Germany is, divided into 16 federal states. Each federal state is completely independent, okay? And they have the ability to work in that state alone. So what happened was that we brought the information, and they had to check it, because it's from independent sources, in order to really be able to work and take it into the full Monty in the whole German system.
So is it the fact that that now they're designated as a terror organization that enabled the German authority to to be able to surveil them in a much more intense way?
Absolutely. So now they have the tools in the toolbox to go after them in a much more serious and efficient way. And the interesting thing is that you could see when we talked to the professionals, they wanted to be able to do that, but they didn't have the tools in order to do that. And they, because of political correctness in some of those circles, they let things pass, which now they can really address and move on. And for fairness, I have to say, we were the one that started with the whole idea. By the way, my premise was always, Israel knows how to deal with Hezbollah amazingly in a military way, intelligence way, but on the policy side, zero. So this was the initial thing. The ones that really helped out was Rich Grinnell and his team at the American Embassy, and different parts of the German system, which I have to tell you, really, you could see serious people in those ministries that were really happy to work and take this on in order to create their own database that they could, from then, independent sources be able to work.
So this is really a model of what can be done outside of a diplomatic service by think tanks and interested organizations.
Mike, this is absolutely true. This is a proof of concept of how to work. Like I said, and it's like always in every business and if you really plan properly, get the relevant structures, understand what the argumentation of the other side is. It's like, in a court of law, you take the argumentation and really turn it around and show that this argumentation doesn't fly, doesn't have, and the counter arguments. For example, I'll give you an example. The German Foreign Ministry said, look, if we designate this will destabilize the region. I said, wow, this will okay. So Hezbollah, choppy in Syria, Lebanon and Syria, the whole region, because of Hezbollah's involvement in Syria. This is going to add, because until now, Hezbollah has only contributed to stability in the region. So if you designate, it's going to contribute to instability, one. Two, they said, if we do that, Hezbollah is going to create terror activities on European soil. I said, wow, that's really interesting. Burgas, Paris, London with chemical weapon, chemical nitrate hydrates. I don't know what they found there, done by Hezbollah. Well, that didn't stop them doing that. And then the third issue was, if we designate the political arm with Hezbollah, we won't be able to talk to Hezbollah, and our bilateral relations are going to be hurt or damaged.
Right.
Showed the research that wasn't true either. So you took this argumentation, not of what you want to tell them, but what they're saying, turn it around factually and show doesn't fly.
How do you show through research? How do you convince somebody through research that it won't harm their relations? What kind of information can you bring?
Okay, so what we did was we defined, how do you define bilateral relations with a country? Hence, how many visits, how many investments, what's the traffic between countries on the economic side and the political, on the academic side? And the minute we defined that, we went 20 years back and showed countries that designated Hezbollah, okay, which was Canada, the Netherlands, and showed that in the first year there was a decline, but afterwards all the graphs went, forward. So also on the economic structure, we showed factually that not only didn't it have an effect, on the contrary, things so the worry that humanitarian aid or other issues are going to be, you could show, the minute the parameters are clear for everyone to look at, okay?
Right.
You show, guys, stories of 1,001 Nights, Alibaba plus.
That is really great work. Really fantastic work. Why, it's interesting. You think of all of the man hours in Israel and in the Israeli government and in the American government that have been devoted to this problem. How come nobody thought of this before?
I don't think that people might have thought of it, but they don't have the attention span. And look, let me put my hat as the Director General of Israel's Foreign Service. Okay, that's why that's where I lost most of my hair. Okay, so you have to deal with 1,000 diplomats. Everyone thinks he's a smart ass. You have a minister that this is like running with a fire extinguisher every day on other issues that happen around the world. You don't really have the attention span to deal with an issue in a structural way. So you say, oh, okay, why don't others do that? Or you give orders for others to really go into it. You don't really have, Mike and Gadi, you don't really have the time. I always say, policy planning. Policy planning is an amazing thing. But in structures of foreign ministries, you put guys in policy planning. How do you do it? They say, hey, he's intelligent, he's smart, but you know what? I'm putting in policy plan, but he's not really operational. Let me have guys who can really, work the issue. Policy planning is nice. They would tell me what's happening in 5 years. In 5 years, I won't be here, the seat of the Director General. And I think it's
it's worth mentioning something about the Israeli Foreign Service and how difficult it is to run it, because an Israeli diplomat once told me what the difference is, Mike, between an American diplomat and an Israeli diplomat, and which goes back to what Golda Meir said, I think, to Nixon, that you have 3 million citizens, but I have 3 million generals. If you go to meet an American, if you go to meet an American diplomat, then he would come with a folder, and if you ask him a question, he would open the folder and say, the president said 1, 2, 3. And if you meet with an Israeli diplomat, he'll shove the folder to the side and say, forget the official bullshit. I tell you what the real deal is now. Here's my opinion. And so if you have to run like a whole structure of mavericks, then there's no way to do it.
There's a lot of truth to that. When I worked in the White House, an Israeli official came in I won't say who he was because he's actually still very prominent in the Israeli scene. But he came in and he gave a presentation. This is during the I think it was just the aftermath of, or maybe during. I can't remember. It was in the Lebanon War, the second Lebanon War. I can't remember if it was actually in the middle of it or just after it. But he came in and he gave a presentation that was 180 degrees out from what the Israeli government position was. And he said, I can't lie, this is the way it really is. I got to tell you. Everything he said actually was very interesting. I have to say, it was one of the more interesting meetings that I was in, but it was impossible that this would ever happen in the American government.
That's right. And Gadi is absolutely right. It's very, very hard when you hear, when you have the so-called, policy of the foreign minister or the foreign ministry, everyone, and this is Israel's society. I mean, everyone is creative. Everyone thinks that he himself, invented the wheel. And it's very tough to run a foreign ministry like this. And by the way, it's very tough, I think, to run anything in Israel. If you look at it, if you zoom out, that's the reason Israel doesn't have really big companies, because then it really needs discipline in order to run them. We are very good at troubleshooting. Yes, research and development, thinking out of the box, inventing stuff. That's wonderful. Running something, take the Germans or the Japanese, not the Israelis. They're not good at that.
Yeah, Israelis all think outside the box, because in Israel there is no box. It's hard to. It reminds me of this picture from The Onion. I used to really be a fan of The Onion, where they had a picture of a cat saying, "Independent-minded cat shits outside the box." So in Israel, there is no box. There is no box. And this is why when people say Israel would be, people say they would be a fascist state, or they recognize the beginning of developments. You can't make 3 Israelis stand in line to a bus. You can't run a fascist state in Israel. No way.
No, it's true. I mean, Jews and Israelis are not good at having authoritarian decisions for them. Everyone, has his own. Look at our own families. I mean, the fact that I'm the so-called head of the family, you think it has a bearing on my children? I mean, everyone speaks his mind and thinks best that I maybe understand something, in a far-fetched way. So Gadi is right. I mean, Israel and dictatorship, this is a joke.
Back to this, to what you did in Germany, it reminds me, when I was in government, we designated Rami Makhlouf in Syria, and it was a big deal. We designated him as part of a criminal terrorist enterprise, and it was a major.
I think you would say that he embezzled more than was absolutely necessary, Rami.
Yeah, much more. Yeah, he runs the Syrian economy, but if you have a bakery and it starts to make money, suddenly Rami Makhlouf is your partner, and he's got 51% in your bakery. But this is actually to the point, because for us, it was very hard. The Treasury had very strict rules about the kind of information you needed in order to designate somebody. And he was not in the government technically. He was, because he's the cousin. He doesn't have an official title in the government. But the information that we got, that we used to designate him, was all from open source intelligence. It was just basically a matter of going to Syrians in the way that you can do today, like you couldn't do in the Syria of old during the Cold War, and asking them, what role does he play, how does he do it, and so on, and then verifying the information. And it was really just a matter of asking the right questions of the right people, and as you're saying as well, being focused on the issue, rather than having any special collection tools or anything else.
By the way, thank you for raising it, Mike. You're absolutely right. I, from the Abba Eban Institute, only used open sources. So in the sense, we used the web, but it was open sources. I didn't come, with Intel or something. And it's a very important point that you raised. The minute I used open sources, I could give it to them and say, look, this is just, here is lights off, spot on. And by doing that, you also are able to have them pass the hurdle of the judicial system, because it's information that you can use. It's not, methoded sources that, suddenly can't give to someone because some people from the intelligence community are unwilling, unable, or I don't know what, to give the relevant evidence at the relevant time.
That's fantastic. So now that you've developed this, you've developed this technique and you have some momentum on this issue, what are the next targets?
So the next target would be going to countries in Europe, like Austria, like France and others, and looking at their structures and who makes decisions and how this works in order to have them follow suit. And also to create a situation where at the end of the day, you don't go to the EU in Brussels in order to influence. You first go from the outer circle in order to really pressure Brussels and say, hey guys, because if I start with Brussels,
Right.
it's running the labyrinth and knowing who is who in the zoo there, is a serious problem.
But also the EU is notoriously anti-Israeli in its diplomatic stances. I don't know, it's deep down in the bureaucracies always, but they have been traditionally anti-Israeli.
Yes, look, I have to tell you, Gadi and Mike, that as you know, I was nearly 30 years in the Foreign Service. So, I served in Germany, in the UK, in Washington. And when I came to the United Nations, I was shocked. Was it the first time I came to New York? No. Was it the first time I came to the UN? No. I visited the UN and New York. But when you come out there and suddenly you look at the hydraulic and the mechanics of how this machine works, I said, it's like, Ripley's, believe it or not, a rhinoceros or a hippopotamus with two heads, you say, this is unbelievable. What? This is happening before your eyes? And what do I mean by that? This is, I think, every American ambassador or Israeli ambassador that comes in and looks at the facts, Gadi, is shocked. And I want to show and substantiate the structural and institutional bias against Israel that has nothing to do with Israeli policies, yes or no. Sometimes we deserve clobbering on our head. Okay, fine. But I'll give you examples, and I have many, but one, thing that really, really strikes me as unbelievable is first, in the Council on Human Rights, which I call the Council on Human Wrongs, there's an Article 4 that deals with human rights violations all over the world, okay? There's a specific article, Article 7, that singles out only one country in the world, surprise, surprise, Israel, okay? Now, it basically says we are going to deal with human rights abuses all over the world through Article 4, and Israel, we're designating a special Article 7. Okay, many odd things happening at the UN, but you go to who votes against this absurd singling out? The United States of America, Canada, Israel, and the great empire of Palau. After the visit, after the ambassador of Palau, I found him in a 14-story building in New York, knocked on his door and said, Ambassador, I came to say thank you. He looked and said, Ron, I'm the ambassador of Palau for 8 years. No one ever said thank you. Since then, I became the #1 expert on Palau. The Europeans, they abstain on this. So who do I go to? I love going to British ambassadors because usually they have a sir before their name. Say, hey, Mark, why are you singling me out? Am I not good enough at least to be with a crowd with North Korea, Libya, and Syria? I can up my game on human rights if you want to. Stum. Nothing. No answer. Okay? Now, you look at this and you say, wow, okay. And then you move from one element to the other and you understand, my God, this is unbelievable what's happening here. And by the way, part of the things that I think, made Nikki Haley so amazing was that when she came in, she looked around and said publicly, she outed it. She basically, this is the emperor's clothes. I mean, this is unbelievable. What's happening here? The world is upside down. Now, why is the world upside down? Because the bad guys hold the steering wheel, okay? Yeah. They hold the steering wheel because out of, they started with 52 countries at the United Nations, and now there are 193 countries. Out of the 193, only 87 are democracies, okay? Over 100 have no clue. Now, they have the majority of the numbers. So if you want to get voted into a position, any position, okay? Let's take the Security Council. The Security Council is even more important than the board of Goldman Sachs, okay? How do you get voted to this board called the Security Council? You have the 5 permanent members. By the way, US, Russia, Britain, France, and they only added China. By the way, added China, which was then under Chiang Kai-shek, okay? The real China entered in 1971. But most of the countries were the ones that fought the Nazis, okay? They have the joker or the veto power. And then you have 10 countries which, in essence, create the 15th structure body, 2 from Africa, 2 from Europe, 2 from South America. So those change every 2 years. In order to get voted into this, you need 2/3 of the General Assembly. 2/3 of 129 countries have to vote for you. So they basically threaten you. They say, hey, Mike, you want to be part of this? Okay, my dear friend, here's Israel, we want to see you vote against Israel. And
do you think it's fair to say, that in that process you just described, that a lot of the heat that Israel is taking is actually displaced heat from the United States? So that what I mean to say is that because the United States is so close to Israel, but the United States is so powerful, you don't want to directly stick your thumb in the eye of America, but you can stick it in the eye of Israel. So it's a way of kind of getting at the American order and getting at the United States indirectly through Israel. Or am I wrong about that?
You're not completely wrong, but there's enough out there against Israel. So it's against Israel and the US. So it's not that they're going after Israel in order because they can't go against the US. Flip it, I would put it this way. Without the amazing relationship, the number 1 strategic relationship, there's nothing that even comes close between Israel and the United States, the American people and the people of Israel. With all the stories of courage and valor that I would be telling you at the Security Council, without the US veto, Israel would be chopped liver, okay? So in the sense, the US is absolutely crucial. All the others, I mean, this is voting patterns, it's amazing to see that. You see countries which really, they love Israel. For example, the Chinese ambassador, okay? Chinese ambassador's wife, huge respect for Israelis, for Jews, loves Israel. Really, they think we're all geniuses. When I was Director General, I decided to put a ban on Israelis visiting China so they don't change their mind. They really think we're geniuses. But in the sense...
I heard that they love the protocols of the Elders of Zion, but positively. Like, this is an amazing plan. Teach us how to do this.
By the the way, you should know that, interesting enough, in Asia, and not just China, Gadi, they don't have the baggage of anti-Semitism there, like in Europe. They're free from that. So if you look at it, they say Jews are good with money, Jews are good traders, and Jews, you know, Nobel Prize winners. In essence, it's very, very positive, very positive.
It's also
And
very Asian. Jews like education, and they are into their families, which is there's nothing more Chinese than that.
That's right. That's right. So, so you see that disconnect between the bilateral relations, okay, and the voting patterns. So countries that have a good bilateral relation with Israel, the voting patterns at the UN, oi, 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 oi. But this is a whole story which I'm writing. I finished writing a book about, where the idea is really lights off, spot on, in really showing this structural and institutional bias against Israel.
When is the book coming out?
I hope it's going to come out, you know, Israel's New Year, Rosh Hashanah. I think it's going to be out.
And this is about your diplomatic career in general, or focused on the UN?
No. It's a diplomatic career, and basically I tell the story through the different stations, but it also includes a good, interesting chapter on the UN and also on the UK. Who can miss a chapter on the UK?
Ron, if I can ask you about current affairs, we have no good word for it. In English, we say the annexation of the Jordan Valley. In Israel, we say implementing sovereignty, because this is a geographical region that didn't belong to another sovereign country before. And there's a whole campaign in Israel saying there would be unbearable international pressure against annexation. What's your take on that?
So I would zoom out, Gadi, for our listeners and viewers to really understand what we are talking about. And what has to be said is the following, that when you look at what we are talking about, is you see a situation where there are many that say, look, this is going to lead to a one-state solution, okay? And there are many that say we need to move into a two-state solution, and a two-state solution is the only solution out there. When you look at those two things, at the end of the day, those two things from an Israeli perspective don't really fly. So it has to be something which is in between, I would say. And I want to make the following point. The big blocks that we are talking about, Ma'ale Adumim, Gush Etzion, Ariel, I don't know if our viewers really understand this, but in essence, everyone knows that in a comprehensive agreement, they're going to be part and parcel of the state of Israel, okay?
These are, just to explain, these are the big settlement blocks adjacent to the 1967 line, so they don't take huge chunks of the territory designated in the two-state solution for the Palestinians.
Okay. Now, if you look at the peace between Israel and Egypt, and why am I bringing the peace between Israel and Egypt to a question you asked me on the West Bank or Judea and Samaria? Because when we made peace with the biggest and most important country in the Arab world, the Egyptians, they understood Israel's security needs and agreed to demilitarize the whole Sinai Peninsula, which is Egyptian soil, okay? If we do a peace agreement, we will have to demilitarize the whole of the West Bank, okay? Because Israel, from its security needs, won't be able to deal with a militarized Palestinian entity, okay, out there. So what I I believe in is that at this stage, Israel has to work in a way that will allow it to control the big blocks and allow contiguity or continuity for Israelis or Jews and also for Palestinians. So from my point of view, the solution is going to be somewhere where I would define it as a state minus. Why do I say that? Because it has different repercussions on the international law of what a state means, what the implications are, what the IDF can do or not do, and this is a serious issue. And I would work in a very cautionary manner at this stage, Gadi.
So the world has been accustomed now for the last 20, 30 years to believing that the two-state solution is the only solution, and also that we're this close to a two-state solution, which I don't believe, with a lot of experience behind that. But whether it's true or not true, that's the attitude that's out there. So if the Israeli government were to come to you, if the prime minister were to turn to you now and ask for your advice about how to go about dealing with this issue now in the UN, what would you tell him?
At the UN?
Yeah, at the UN or internationally. How do you start to get people to think about this differently, since their minds are all focused on the two-state solution, and some of them are inevitably going to see this as destroying the only possible solution?
Well, look, it's not just. I think that people understand that the minute you have Hamas in Gaza, and the fact that Abu Mazen himself has not set foot in Gaza since 2005, okay? By the way, that's where I was until 2007. But through 2005, Abu Mazen hasn't stepped into Gaza. So in the sense you have a Gaza controlled by Hamas, the Palestinian Authority controlling the West Bank and Ramallah and others, but there's no connection here, and I think the world is still talking in this notion because it's not because they're bad people, but because they don't really understand what's happening on the ground here, and it creates huge challenges. Israel has to be able to, especially in our neighborhood, to navigate very, 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 very carefully this. And look, most of the world forgot that Israel completely disengaged out of Gaza, completely, and not just out of Gaza. We took out 4 settlements in the West Bank to show that there's political horizon. People forget that, okay?
Right.
And look what happened. They turned Gaza into a terrorist hub, lobbying not just missiles into Israel. And so in the sense, to add a terrorist state on Israel's borders, I think this is a crazy idea. And it has to be in a very, very cautious and sensitive way in order to navigate this. This is not a zbeng v'gamarnu. How do you say zbeng v'gamarnu, Gadi, in English?
It's a zbeng v'gamarnu.
I have to say, probably because
and one more thing, I want to say something on. Look at what happened. What happened is that through many, many years, people said, look, if you do a certain move, okay, take Jerusalem, for example. Oh, this is going to really create havoc and the whole Middle East is going to burn. You do that and you see that, all the people won't be able to say those things in the future in order to say, the whole region is going to burn. No, it did not burn, okay? And I remember I was interviewed and someone said, Ambassador, they're threatening with 3 days of rage. I said, wow, that's really, I'm really, taken by 3 days of rage, because I thought that in the other 362 days, they're doing yoga and meditation. No?
I have to say something there's a very different perspective if you're an American and an Israeli. Partly when I lived in America, the trip was that you can drive in one direction without meeting a border for 3 or 4 hours, and even 2 weeks. And Israel, the terrorist state that you're referring to, and this is difficult to explain for people who don't know how small this place is. From Judea and Samaria, you can see the beach of Tel Aviv. You can actually see with the binoculars, you can see my house from this designated area, and it's a mountain above a seaboard. So, and the width of it is 9 miles. So if we had a Gaza the size of Judea and Samaria, Israel would not be able to run its regular day-to-day life. So this is completely out of the question. Now, I want to add one thing here in terms of security, because I think that it is absolutely crucial that we have a land barrier between the Palestinians of the West Bank and the rest of the Arab world. When you look at I come from the left in a two-state solution, and I have abandoned it. And partly this was after the so-called Arab Spring, because once you saw that nationalism is not a viable principle in the Arab world and that nation states are collapsing, I think Israel's greatest fear is from this lava of chaos just rolling into Israel. You saw Daesh, you saw all the proxies of the Shiites, of the proxies of Iran all over the region. We can't let this lava roll across the mountain ridge and overrun us. So one of the crucial things is to also signal to the Palestinians that they're not going to geographically connect to a unit, a regional unit in which we are a tiny minority, because they think of themselves as a minority, say in Israel, but in their consciousness, they're a great majority. There are, 400 million Muslims around us, and we are a country of 9 million. So security is, yeah.
No, that's why I added on the demilitarized issue that most people don't understand why it's crucial. Why it's crucial to really be able to reach a comprehensive agreement. And so you're absolutely on this, Gadi, I think spot on the problems of security that Israel will have and has to deal with, clearly.
Well, listen, Gadi, unless you disagree, I think we should probably bring this to an end, huh?
It's 10:17 p.m. In Tel Aviv, and I'm guessing also in Jerusalem, because for us, Eastern Standard Time is also Eastern Western Time in our 9 miles. But one is in the mountains,
But I want to use this opportunity, Mike and Gadi, to say again that really, as someone who served many years in the United States, I think we're very grateful in Israel for this amazing strategic relationship between both our peoples, which is the common values, not just the strategic alliance and partnership. And I know this comes only seldom from an Israeli representative, but I want to say through you, thank you to the American people, the American administrations, for this amazing support through the years, and we have to make sure this continues.
Well, you picked the right outlet in which to send that message, because this is the fastest growing television channel in the United States, as I'm sure you know. It's actually my view. I say this all the time, and it sounds like a propaganda line, but it's not. It's my actual considered view that the United States and Israel are going to be, that Israel is going to be the best ally of the United States in the coming decades. Precisely because the US is so uncertain about the Middle East, about if it even wants to be there, but it's still going to have interests there. Its ambivalence is going to continue, but it's going to have interest there, and it's going to have very trusted partners with whom it can work. And when you look at the capabilities that Israel has in military intelligence, cyber, and so on, there's no other alternative. So in this region that is going to remain important, where the United States is going to be ambivalent and confused, the relationship with Israel stands out above all others. So I don't see anything but greater things to come. Do you disagree with that?
Can I add something before Ron responds? Something maybe for the many Israeli audience. I don't know if you know, Mike, but Counterbalance is also the fastest growing program in Israel. So
I did not know that. That's great to know.
Yeah. It's so I'd like to add to the Israeli viewers that we should keep our long-standing policy of not forcing America to fight our wars. The policy has always been supply us and we'll take care of it ourselves. I think if you look at the move in America, the last thing we want is to drag America to sending boots on the ground.
I agree.
That is
it's better to send suits on the ground than boots on the ground.
Hey, you know what?
This sounds like another one of your Peres imitations.
That's what I was going to say. I heard that you can do a very good Shimon Peres impression. Could you say it's better to have suits on the ground than boots on the ground as Shimon Peres? Could you do that for us on tape?
First of all, I have to tell you that Makhlouf at the Washington Institute does a better Shimon Peres and Arafat than I do. But yes, Shimon Peres would probably say, you know, Mike, it's better suits on the ground than boots on the ground. He was an amazing president, and wow, it shows you how many years.
That was fantastic. That was absolutely fantastic. I think we better close with that. That's too good to.
On this happy note.
On this happy note. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, Ron.
Thank you, Prime Minister Peres. Goodbye. Thank you very much.